Hey, good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to today's colloquium in the series on provenance research at the German Lost Art Foundation. I am Isabella Bozsa and looking forward to moderate this evening. Before we start, let me give you some housekeeping advice. So please, if you are not one of the speakers and do not have a contribution yet, please switch off your microphone and your camera during the presentations. This supports the smooth running of the process. When you will have a contribution later, we will of course be happy to see and listen to you. Today's topic of the colloquium is the new published working paper on missionary societies and religious orders in German colonies and a contribution to ethnographic collections that the author Jan Hüsgen will present to us. Jan's presentation will be followed by a comment of Ohiniko Toffa. This will also lead us to the following discussion. Please note that the event will be recorded with the aim to publish the recording on the website of the German Lost Art Foundation. As an introduction of the topic, I would like to start with a personal experience of provenance research on the collection of the Basel Mission at the Museum der Kultur in Basel. 2 weeks ago, I visited the storage at the museum in Basel together with Rachel Mariembe, who was here for a short research visit from Cameroon. We examined the collection originating from the kingdom of Bamoun, to which she belongs. She was fascinated by some books that contain Islamic prayers as well as diagrams. They hint at the conversion of King Joya to Islam, as well as his efforts to create his own religion and scripture. Mariembe said the books are invaluable to today's Bamoun society as historical records of former religious practices in the kingdom. When examining the books closer, we found a folded note on which a missionary had written that the books originally came from Joya's library and, as a final word, worthless. Even if it is unclear how exactly the missionary came into possession of the book and how he arrived at his assessment, this example shows how important missionary collections can be for the communities of implication in the countries of origin as historical evidence to which they demand access. Further, it reveals how biased missionary testimonies are and how careful we must be while working with missionary archives that are related to ethnographic collections. Although there exists extensive literature on the relation of the mission and colonialism, critical approaches in provenance research to missionary collections, I would argue, are rather new. For a long time, missionaries were not considered to be of central importance as suppliers of ethnographic collections, and their role was often seen as unproblematic because they were not considered to be associated with colonial violence. Projects that ask about the colonial entanglement of missionary collections remained rare cases in the 2010s, like the exhibition Mission Possible ? In Basel 2015, or the conference in the Haus Völker und Kulturen in St. Augustin 2017. Then, since 2020-21, mission collections have been given greater attention in provenance research and discussions about colonial heritage in Germany. With reference to numerous initiatives and research projects, for example, at CERES, the Center for Religious Studies at the University of Bochum, the Global Heritage Lab in Bonn, the Institut for Weltkirche und Mission in St. Georgen, or the Pressing Matters research project in the Netherlands, one may argue that a new field of research has emerged in recent years around missionary collections. Nevertheless, in Germany and other countries with collections from former colonies, such as Switzerland or the Netherlands, we are still a long way from systematically addressing missionary collections and their colonial implications. The new working paper picks up on this issue, creating incentives and a starting point for future projects on missionary collections from German colonies. Now I would like to present our today's speakers. I am happy to announce that today is the first day of Jan Hüsgen as the head of the Department of Cultural Goods and Collections from Colonial Contexts at the German Lost Art Foundation. Until now, Dr. Jan Hüsgen was a research advisor at the same department, providing expert advice to research projects on collections from colonial contexts. This might entail, for example, research on trade networks or plundering in the context of colonial wars. His main research interests include the relations of missionary societies to colonialism, with a particular focus on the context of missionary collections. As a trained historian, he has conducted archival research in North America, the Caribbean, and West Africa. Before joining the German Lost Art Foundation, he worked in various research projects on colonial history at the Leibniz University Hanover and the Dresden State Art Collections. Further, he had fellowships at the German Historical Institutes in Washington, D.C. and Paris. Important publications to be mentioned are Mission und Sklaverei, die Herrnhuter Brüdergemeinde und die Sklavenemanzipation in Britisch und Dänisch Westindien. It is a book based on his doctoral thesis, which he completed at the University of Hanover. Another important publication that was published last year, he edited with Larissa Förster and Sarah Fründ of the German Lost Art Foundation. The volume resulted of a conference and is called Resist, Reclaim, Retrieve, the long history of the struggle for the restitution of cultural heritage and ancestral remains taken under colonial conditions. As our second speaker, I would like to welcome Dr. Ohiniko Mawussé Toffa. He's a Germanist and cultural historian. He completed his doctorate at the University of Bremen at the Departments of Religious Studies and Linguistics in 2019. He then worked as a research assistant on the project Provenance of Colonial Collections from Togo in the Ethnological Museums of Dresden and Leipzig. Since 2024, he is provenance researcher at the Central Archive and the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation. His main fields of research are the German colonial history in Togo, the history of West Africa and decolonization processes, museum history, and post-colonial theory. He published his PhD in 2023, which is called Christliche Moral und koloniale Herrschaft in Togo. And as these two angles, the Christian self-perception and colonial rule, are central aspects in dealing with missionary collections, we are happy to have you with us in the discussion tonight. So first of all, I would like to give the floor to Jan Hüsgen. We are very much looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Isabella, for this kind introduction. And yes, it's a great opportunity to present my working paper here in the Kolloquium Provenienzforschung, and especially a good day to starting the position as head of department after my parental leave, and I would like to extend a warm welcome especially to the former head of the department, Larissa Förster, and the former head of the German Lost Art Foundation, Gilbert Lupfer, and I'm very glad that so many colleagues are here today. Now I will go to my presentation. And now you should see the title of my presentation, Missionary Societies and Religious Orders in German Colonies and Their Contribution to Ethnographic Collections. Yes, Isabella and Ohiniko, again, thank you that you are preparing this evening with me for the moderation, and I'm looking really forward to your comment, Ohiniko. As Isabella was so kind to already mention the extensive research on the relationship between mission and colonialism. I'm gladly in the position to leave this mostly out of my presentation and to focus solely on the context of this working paper, the contribution of missionaries to the context of colonial collecting. My presentation is divided into three main parts. I will first outline in the introduction the relevance for this paper and the role of missionary collecting in policy papers and discussions so far, before presenting the scope of the research paper, its results, and some thoughts what is the relevance of missionary collections today. I would like to start with the Savoir report that also refers in a short quote to missionary collections. Quote, throughout Europe, along with these state institutions, we also see the addition of so-called missionary museums. There a variety of ritual objects are gathered and displayed. Talismans, masks, entire tombs, taken by Catholic and Protestant priests from the African peoples, targeted by their attempts at Christian conversion. So although Fabien Sarr and Benedict Savoy did not focus on missionary collections, instead their focus were state-owned museums in France, they at least pointed out here already to the importance of missionaries as actors in the entanglement of colonial collecting. This second quote refers to the guidelines from German museums, care of collections from colonial context from the German Museum Association, and in the chapter that deals with the groups which should be critically questioned regarding the acquisition of collection items from colonial rule, we find in this list as well missionaries. Missionaries in colonial territories. Missionaries often had collections of their own, frequently with religious objects given to them by converts, for example. So missionaries are recognized as important acquisition actors in this process of colonial collecting. However, the definition is quite vague here, how this, especially the context of the transfer in times of conversion, should be questioned. As Isabella already mentioned, there already have been some previous research projects that focused on missionary collections, and the starting point here has not been in Germany, but in Switzerland, with two projects that had been running at the Museum der Kulturen in Basel, one by Dagmar Konrad, and on the collections Basel Mission acquired in China and in what is today's Ghana, and one by Isabella Bozsa on the forms of missionary collecting in Cameroon and India. Both reports are available online. The Netherlands had been running a research project, Pressing Matter, the last 4 years, and one of the research projects, which was led by Peter Pels and Birgit Meyer, was focusing on the issue of heritage and the question of conversion. So the Netherlands already in this overarching project tried to analyze in one case how objects collected by Protestant and Catholic missionaries ended up in Dutch museums collections. In the German research on missionary collections is very dynamic, and there are several actors and initiatives that are working on this topic. I will start on the left as a starting point. The German Society for Mission Studies dedicated its yearly conference last year under the title Restitution Matters to the issue of colonial collections and what this has to do with missionaries. It was a 3 days conference that included as well perspectives by historians, anthropologists, and theological approaches from colleagues in Ghana, for example. In Germany, the Institute, I have to look it up, for Global Church and Mission is leading, especially in the focus of the Catholic Church, how to deal with the colonial past and collections in this context, and they run a project that should access colonial collections in religious orders, but organize as well workshops like this one in St. Augustine, revisiting missionary collections within the global church. And finally, I would like to point to a recent workshop by the expert group on missionary collections in the AG Koloniale Provenienzen of the Arbeitskreis Provenienzforschung, together with the Center for Religious Studies in Bochum, who organized a workshop that dealt with how researchers and members of religious orders and missionary societies can work together in research projects, and what are the problems and how can we deal with them. So there is actually a lot going on in this field that really makes it necessary to give some kind of an overview of how many mission societies are really connected to this topic of missionary collections, and what is the state of provenance research, as well as what might be research infrastructures in this case. In the recent years, I have tried to get an overview of the projects the German Lost Art Foundation has funded so far that had a focus on missionary collections. And we have only one project that was initiated by a religious order. This was the initial check in the Forum der Völker in Werl by the Franciscan order Saxonia. All other projects are either set up by museums or by research institutes like the Institute for Global Church and Mission in Frankfurt. And in not all of these projects, missionaries are the main actors of research. Sometimes they are only one part of the whole project that deals with the collection. So these are 7 projects with a stronger focus on missionary acquisitions for museums, and by a whole number of 85 projects, it is clear that its missionary collections are not the main focus in our funding. However, that we feel in the last years it's a stronger interest, especially in smaller projects, to get a first overview of the collections. I come now to the second part of my presentation, in which I want to present to you how the working paper is structured, what are the main questions of the working paper, and give an overview of the results. I also will point out 2 examples of 2 mission societies. The main questions for my paper were which missionary societies and missionaries orders were active in German colonial territories, what information can be identified regarding the context in which objects from missionary collections and ethnographic museums were acquired. That was especially of interest for me because in the literature, the acquisition context in missionary collections are often quite vague, and it is not common to suspect any forms of colonial violence in missionary forms of collecting. And finally, what research infrastructures exist for research on missionary societies? This research program had in the following led to some problems. I use this world mission map of the Basel Mission Society to point you shortly to that. As you can see, the Basel Mission itself was active in West Africa, in China, and in India. So for the working paper itself, only its activities, for example, in the German colony Cameroon, would be considered as focus. So this means that I had to leave out several German mission societies that were active, of course, in the 19th century, but that had no focus on areas of German colonial rule, like, for example, the already mentioned Museum der Forum der Völker in Werl with the Franciscan order, or the Hermannsburg mission. Both societies were not active in areas of German colonial rule. I also only took a look at the societies that were active in the time frame of German formal colonial rule. That does not mean that I would say this is only a colonial situation, but I had to limit somehow the focus of research. And I also had to limit the focus to which connections between missionary societies or religious orders and museums I am looking for, and I only put the main focus on ethnographic collections. If I found something, I of course listed it in the profiles of the mission societies, but I did not, for example, a concise overview of the connection between mission societies and natural history collections. As I started the working paper and discussed it with colleagues, and I had the quite ambitious idea to add as well an overview of mission stations for the societies presented in the paper. However, I had to recognize that this is nearly impossible due to the data that exists, that it is not possible to get any clear overviews of what is a mission station and how long does it exist. And so that might be possible for some societies, but not for all. And this is as well the case with an overview of missionaries. That would, of course, be a quite interesting and quite helpful resource for research, but I wasn't able to provide this. As I started working through this topic with the reading literature on German mission societies, I came across this article by Ulrich van der Heyden, and he writes, quote, "It seems appropriate here to provide at least an outline of those German mission societies that were active in the German colonies in Africa, Asia, and the South Seas, describe what their intentions and real success were, and elucidate what recent research informs us about them. It can only be a rough overview. It would be simply impossible here to consider adequately the 331 Protestant mission societies in Germany at the end of the 19th century that employed around 1,000 missionaries." So I'm not sure of the high number of Protestant mission societies, but I think it's quite interesting that he only for the Protestant mission societies, he comes for the number of 1,000 missionaries. So we see in this quote that we are as well talking about a significant number that might be interesting for cases of provenance research. By providing the overview which societies were present in areas of German colonial rule. I started with work reading the historical literature on mission and religious orders in the colonies. For example, the Catholic mission in the German colonies by Professor Schmidlin from the University of Münster, and as well as Mission and Colonial Politics by Karl Miert, the Protestant view on the same topic. Both books provide overviews and yeah, they as well as I checked the findings with administrative literature like the German Colonial Handbook or the Deutsches Kolonialblatt. In order to get a better overview for the history of the individual missions and the actors involved in these profiles, I especially used for the Protestant African mission, the Protestant societies active in Africa, the book by Thorsten Altener on Protestant mission societies in Africa that contains as well an overview of mission stations and missionaries itself, as the large volume by Hermann Mückler on mission in Oceania, which not only has a short overview of all missionary societies in Oceania, but as well of the individual persons employed by the missions. It's a bit more complicated if, in the case with missionary collections itself. So it is not possible to get a real number of how many mission collections itself exist in the possession of mission societies or religious orders. However, in recent years, there has been a focus. Isabella already mentioned the conference in St. Augustin in 2017. Here on the left side, the volume Missionsgeschichtliche Sammlung heute presents the contribution of this conference, and one article by Tanja Holthausen dealt with a project by the German Conference of Superiors of Religious Orders. She was employed by this society to get an overview of the collections of religious orders in Germany. However, due to the fact that she was not allowed to publish the detailed information itself, her article and overviews only contain a very rough overview. So we only know how many societies have more than 100 objects or more than thousands, but no detailed information of where we can find these collections, how is the regional focus, and so on. The dissertation by Rebecca Loder-Neuhold gives an overview of Catholic mission museums in German-speaking Europe, and gives so far detailed information how so far she was possible to access them. And the quite often mentioned Zentrum for Religious Studies has taken up the discussion of the how to deal with the collections by religious orders and mission societies somehow, because they organized a second conference after a math of a 2017 conference in St. Augustine that dealt as well with how to deal with missionary collections today. So going through this literature and going through an old, not publicly available master thesis from 1997, one is able to somehow get a sense of idea of the collections and can somehow get very vague profiles of this of the collections of these religious orders. I would will now go on with how the working paper is structured and present two examples. Each chapter, the working paper itself, is organized according to the areas of German colonial rule, and each chapter starts with an overview of the missionary societies and religious orders in that region. I have decided to put the female orders as a single as a separate organization in the presentation, as they often had their own collections and the actors on their own in the in this missionary organizations. So this is the overview for Togo, and we see here, for example, that the Basel mission societies, who had been active in West Africa since 1828, had to leave the area of German colonial rule, but was later employed in 1913 with a mission in North Togo. So it was included in this overview. And only these societies highlighted in color are included with a full profile in the working paper. I decided only to include those societies that for whom I was able to identify information on collections. The structure of each profile itself starts with a header with general information on the society. It gives a short historical background on how the society was founded, how it developed, and how its actual situation is, and it gives an overview of a mission field and the collections. The profile ends with an overview of the resources for research, including periodicals and archives. That leads me to my first example, the North German Mission Society. The society was founded in Hamburg in 1836 by the fusion of several missionary associations. And after internal conflicts and failed missionary ventures, the society was re-established in Bremen in 1859. So in its very early time, the missionary society was active in New Zealand and the East Indies. However, the main missionary area since 1847 has been West Africa, the later region of the German colony Togo. With regard to collections, there are no information in the literature that the society had set up an own collection in the mission house. However, the missionaries were important suppliers for items from the mission field for the collections of the Übersee Museum, and some missionaries sold or donated items to museums in Detmold and Berlin. With regard to resources for research on this society, thanks to initiatives to digitize materials dealing with German colonial history, it is nearly possible to access all volumes of the periodicals of the North German Mission Society at the State University Library Hamburg, and, for example, to access scientific literature written by the missionaries, like the quite famous book, Die Ewe, by Jakob Spitz. And the society donated its archive to the state archives in Bremen, and this is accessible through the archive database Arkinsus in Lower Saxony and Bremen. And as you can see, they are already providing digitized they are already beginning to digitize some parts of their holdings. So this is an example of a journal from the mission station Ho. My other example are the Missionaries of the Sacred Heart, which have been founded in France in 1854 as a missionary congregation of the Catholic Church. In 1886, the order founded a house in Antwerp to offer Germans a place to be trained as the missionary. At that time of the Kulturkampf, it was not possible of the order to establish a province of the order in the German Reich. This, however, happened in 1897 in Hildburg near Münster, and a female order was founded in 1899. The mission field was focusing mainly on Oceania, and the society, the male order, had an open museum that existed between 1897 to 1941. Some of its earliest holdings might go back to the fact that the order supplied items to the colonial exhibition in Berlin and received them later back. The collection was sold in 1960s to a private collector who later on sold parts of these collections to the Museum der Kulturen in Basel. The missionaries itself did not only acquire objects from museums in Berlin, however, also for museums, for the museum of the order itself, but as well as from museums in Berlin, Stuttgart, and Münster. The female order itself, the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, gave parts of their collection as a permanent loan to the Landesmuseum in Hanover in 2018. And here on the left side, we see one of the last display of the museum from the 1960s, photograph digitized by the Landschaftsverband Westfalen-Lippe. So these two profiles already point out to the variety in information regarding collections and or resources for research, as there is very much information on this specific museum because, for example, Rebecca Loder-Neuhold wrote a lot about this example. There are nearly no information available for the archival situation or for the digitization of periodicals or publications by the order. Altogether, by analyzing the different areas of German colonial rule, I was able to identify 48 mission societies and religious orders, 26 Protestant mission societies, and 21 religious orders. And I wasn't aware of it before, but in the historical literature, the Latter-day Saints are not included into this overviews, as they are not part of the official Christian ecumenical movement. However, they played an important part in the mission society in Samoa. 17 mission societies and religious orders were included in the overview. And as you can see, this I did not only focus on mission societies that had a headquarter in Germany in case of the Basel mission, and in case of the Steyler mission, I also included these societies because of their close connection to the German Empire. With regard to acquisition context, a wide range of acquisition contexts could be identified in this missionary collections, including personal gifts or acquisitions at markets. However, this should not lead to the false conclusion that mission collections do not contain objects that have been unlawfully acquired. The following acquisition contexts contradict this assumption. I think it's still problematic how we can approach the context of the transfer of items in the context of conversion. Another, I think, very interesting concept is Eva Rabe in an article pointed out, especially the case of sales of secret or sacred items to missionaries in emergency situations. She compared it with the with the case of Notverkäufe in the German Third Reich. So she tried to use this concept from the Nazi looted art to find an explanation for the situation of the persons who were had to sold items under duress. And finally, we have to take into account that missionaries participated in military expeditions, maybe as translators. However, they also acquired booty in this context. They looted graves and sent ancestral remains to museums, and especially in the case of the destruction of elements of other religions, they acquired items for their collections. So I would now come slowly to the end of my paper, and this is a bit like an outlook how it matters to deal with this topic. I mentioned it quite a lot in this paper, but it's in this presentation. However, it's the Zentrum for Religious Studies has taken over the collections of the White Fathers from Cologne and in 2023 from Munich. So this draws our attention to the fact that many religious orders are, the members are quite old. They don't have enough new members and they are closing down their houses. And in this case, in several places, there is no possibility to get the collections to any who is taking care of them any longer. So the Centrum for Religious Studies in Bochum has taken over this collection and is now doing research on them. The other example is the closing of the Forum der Völker in Werl. The Franciscan order closed the museum down. They weren't able any longer to take care of the collection, and they handed over the collection to the Landschaftsverband Westfalen-Lippe. So there is a need now to work on these collections before they vanished somehow. I mean, these are both examples where a solution could be found that secures the collections itself and makes it possible to research them. And this is not the case in any example. And we should keep in mind that missionary collections might contain as well important items for the societies in the countries the missionaries acquired these items. On the left, you see a photograph from a return the Grassi Museum made in 2024 to the Kauna in Australia, and they gave back very early cultural items that had been acquired by Leipzig missionaries. And here you see a fishing net that was given back. And on the right side, you see as an example of a broader topic, a book by Bruno Gutmann on Rindi von Moshi. And we have to keep in mind that missionaries in their archives, as well as in their periodicals and books, acquired several information on the societies they were living among. And it is worth trying to find ways to make these information accessible. So I guess these are very important examples why it still matters to deal with missionary collections. And yeah, I thank you for your patience, and I'm looking forward to the comment by Ohiniko.
Thank you very much, Jan, for your intriguing presentation. It gives us an idea how the working paper is structured and how we may use it in provenance research. It also gives us an idea of the massive work, the historical research that you have that is behind the paper that you have done. Thank you as well for pointing out on today's relevance of working with missionary collections, and what I also think that the examples illustrate quite well these fascinating historical networks that in which missionary societies acted as global players, if you want to put it like that. We will now listen to Ohini's comment. So I would like to kindly ask the audience to keep your questions or comments to Jan's presentation for the discussion afterwards. You can also put them, write them down in the chat, and we will pick them up later. Ohini, we are now looking very much forward to hear your comment on the paper. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabella. And thank you, Jan, for inviting me to comment your wonderful paper. I have more praise than critics. And you know me, if there is any critic, I will say it. That's why I want to start by thanking you for your engagement in producing 125 pages about how hot missionaries collected from the former colonies. You have showed that history matters, and especially in this case, colonial history, while dealing with colonial collections and provenance research. I want to thank you again for this wonderful job you've done. Your paper contains a lot of indication and a complex of history on collections, mission, colonial politics, Christianity, and paganism. With this working paper, you lead us to our central duty as provenance researchers, our job to research and write histories, because provenance are histories. And this is a great contribution your paper gives to the researchers community. In your paper, we can find a lot of information related to archival material, where and how archive to collection can be found, used for the provenance research. Allow me, therefore, to join you in this wonderful journey you started to complete your histories, your resources for history writing, researching provenance research, provenance with my post-colonial reading of mission, the history of mission. The field of provenance research to colonial collection, the post-colonial provenance research, is a very young research field in growth, developing its own research methods and theories, because the provenance of colonial collections calls for a changing of perspective and paradigm in history writing, anthropology, and etc. Colonial provenance are non-European ontologies and epistemologies. Because of that, because I am talking about history, I want to bring to notice the warning of Walter Benjamin about history writing, not to write the history only from the perspective of the dominant discourses. In this way, my contribution to your paper will tell the history of the so-called heathen, the history of the pagan. Because without mentioning it clearly in your paper, you were giving also indications to what was considered in the mission context as evil, Satan, and which therefore need to be corrected. Jomo Kenyatta, the first president of Kenya, said in his book, Facing Mount Kenya, as far as religion was concerned, the African was regarded as a clean slate on which anything could be written. He was supposed to take wholeheartedly all religious dogma of the white man and keep them sacred and unchallenged, no matter how alien to the African mode of life. The European based their assumption on the conviction that everything that the African did or thought was evil. The missionaries endeavored to rescue the depraved souls of the African from the eternal fire. Kenyatta, 1965, 259. And he continued, the missionaries, they condemned customs and beliefs which they could not understand. One of the actors of the mission history, or the history of mission, or the history of the collections, are the so-called heathen or pagan. They are unheard. They are mostly also inexistent in the mission archive, but they're still there. The Christian is the negation of the heathen. To dig up to the history of the heathen, we need a special critical consideration to the voice of the Christian in the colonial archive. Mission exists indeed because there are the heathen or the pagan. What is the legitimization of mission, evangelization, etc., if not conversion of the so-called heathen? The mission theology loves the heathen under the condition to convert them to Christianity. The inspector of the Bremen mission defined in this sense the Negro as someone who was forgotten by the Almighty God. Read Friedrich Fabry on the genesis of the paganism. He saw the genesis of the paganism in the curse of Cana. My comments to your paper, on your paper, aimed therefore to envision how we can work with your paper in other research to justify restitution of cultural belongings from missionary collections. And my suggestion to work and deepen provenance research to justify restitution will come from this perspective. We provenance researchers will show from the perspective of tolerance or toleration how those artifacts from missionaries can be considered as trophies, witnessing for a certain violence of the colonial modernity, which sometimes consider believing as psychological illness. And in the Christianity, it is not the whole believing, but the belief in many gods, which was systematically wrong. This is why I suggest to write in our further discussion, or to research more in our further discussion in our group on collection from missionaries, to research more on the colonial history of conversions. It has been presented till today as salvation. What if it is not like that? What if the real freedom should come from another perspective? I want to suggest for our further discussion the book of John Locke, later on toleration, the book of Kierkegaard, Søren Kierkegaard wrote a book on seeing psychology of conversion and the book of Jean-Luc Nancy on deconstruction of Christianity. In Africa, many books or romans deal with the Christianity, from Le Fils du Fétiche of David Ananou of Togo to Things Fall Apart of Chinua Achebe, passing by Mission to Kala of Mongobeti. The African scholars continue to deal critically with the remains of the history of Christianity. And if there is a bottom line to all this view, it can be written with Achille Mbembe's book, Afrique Indocile, Disobedient Africa, in which Mbembe shows how Africa resists to this Christianization. People still believe in this spirituality. And for respect for those believers, I want to plead for tolerance for their spirituality. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you
Isabella.
very much, Ohini.
Thank you very much,
Ohini, for this moving plea, and also for your theoretical reflection of the working paper, as well as its eventual practical implications on provenance research and restitution processes. You highlighted the demonization of non-Christian beliefs and religious practices as a main tool of the mission, and its central meaning in the colonial mindset as well. As I also found it interesting, the connection that you made between the paper, the working paper of Jan, and the restitution processes of missionary collections, as Jan has also pointed out before. So to begin the discussion, I would like to give Jan the opportunity to react on your paper, on your comment, and ask Jan again if you might emphasize the framework of the working paper again. Who is the target audience or group of the paper?
Yes, thank you, Ohini, for your thought-provoking and comment. By writing the working paper, I realized at a certain point that I had the problem that I was never really getting in my research to the so-called heathen, because they weren't, I mean, it was not an archival study, so I was not working with primary archival sources. But in all the materials I've been working on so far, the heathen were only passively portrayed by the missionaries. And so, I mean, that's not surprising for you and me. But however, I was struggling how to access this problem. And that lead me to the one practical problem in provenance research on missionary collections. The issue of with whom should we work in these collections? So who are the people that should be integrated in provenance projects? I know that you are working as well in a project that works together with traditional priests in Ghana and Togo, but I guess that is quite an exception, because and how can we overcome this problem that colonialism has in most cases led to the spreading of Pentecostal churches, for example, that condemn traditional beliefs in these regions? So I guess there should be a way to your plea for tolerance might be a guide to somehow set up such research more in this regard. To get to Isabella's question, to the audience of the working paper, my idea was to make this information more accessible for international researchers. I mean, as most of the materials are only available in German. However, I guess it is as well very very helpful to have all the information on archives and periodicals at one hand as well for German provenance researchers. But I guess it's a problem if you're working in Ghana to find your way through this archival landscape and yeah, digital material.
Okay, thank you. I would now like to ask you both of you a question concerning the discussion around colonial violence of missionary collections. You both addressed the violent appropriation methods as well as epistemic violence resulting of the very idea of Christianization, which is last but not least expressed in labels and narratives that we find in the missionary archives and also in our daily work in museum databases. So, but yeah, to broaden the discussion, I would like to raise another aspect which may appear as the second side of the coin to this colonial violence. The question about the agency of the missionized population. So to both of you, where do you see or situate local agency in the overarching power asymmetries of the colonial context? Don't know who wants to start.
I would like if Jan want to start, because Jan do want to start to say something, and I will join you, or can
Go
I
ahead,
say?
and I'll jump in.
Okay, Isabella, thank you a lot for this question, because it is a very central question, also coming back in the provenance research to colonial collection to classical, I mean, the collection of military and collection under colonial order. And the issue of agency of the missionized people is difficult, quite difficult to be answered. But considering what I have just said, the issue of conversions and as a central dispositive in the colony, the evangelization and the presentation that the new life, the better life, is the one in Christianity. It is not the fault of missionaries to do so, but it's restrained this issue of evangelization, restrained the freedom to choose of the colonized people, and that's why I am seeing the issue of agency very critically. I don't know if and under which condition I can speak about agency or freedom to choose in this way, and how I can explain that. At the same time, I consider some people in the colonies, they resist to come to Christianity. That means there is any way, a certain freedom to choose, and what's happened to them, or how was their life in the colony if they refuse. There are this need deep for a large research to answer quietly this question of agency of the missionized people. So to summarize, I think it is a little bit difficult to answer it in a way to say the missionized people, they have this freedom to choose, and they don't have this freedom. The power and the asymmetric under asymmetric power relation under the perspective of modern life, and sometimes the politic of demonization of those, the others' way of life restrained this freedom. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ohin. Maybe I'll just add 2 examples that came to my mind by working through all this material. I mean, I'm not an expert for Cameroonian history, but I found it quite interesting as I read this episode that some members of the Baptist mission weren't in favor of a Basel mission coming to Cameroon. And then they started this initiative to get German Baptists coming to Cameroon. And so I think such movements that Christianized people stand up for their interests in this case. That was one point I found quite interesting, remarkable. And the other thing is that we see in many German colonies at the beginning of World War I that the German missionaries had to leave the country, and that in some cases positions are taken over by members of a mission of a Christianized population, so that there is a slowly growing movement of a local church that higher ranks in the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. And also both of you mentioned the marginalization of the missionarized people in the missionary archives that we are mostly dealing with when we work with missionary collections. So this is a big challenge, I would say, to tackle down this, or to reveal the agency of historical actors. I would now like to thank you very much. Thank everybody who was participating. Thank you very much, Jan Hüsgen, for the presentation. Thank you, Ohiniko Toffa, for the comment. Thank you, everybody, for joining the discussion, making it a lively discussion. And I think it is an incredibly important tool and great work that you did, Jan, with your working paper. And I see it as very helpful for future research projects on missionary collections from former German colonies. And at the same time, it is a tool of transparency of missionary collections in the sense that is also important to communities in the countries of origin to get information on the whereabouts of their cultural heritage and ethnographic collections, and eventually lead to restitution processes. Before we all leave now, I would like to encourage you to turn on your cameras that we can see each other. And please switch on your microphones and give our speakers, the organizers, and all the supporting colleagues of the German Lost Art Foundation a warm applause. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was lovely to see you. Have a wonderful evening.